There are many things that people fear in life: the unknown, the dark, failure, rejection. But there's one fear that's often overlooked, one that hides quietly beneath the surface, and that's the fear of being truly seen. The fear that if someone were to see you for who you really are, they wouldn't like what they find. It's a fear that I've carried with me for as long as I can remember, a fear that kept me from letting people in and truly opening up to the world. My name is Emma, and this is the story of the fear I've kept hidden for so long. The fear that I could never be enough. The fear that I could never let anyone see the real me. It all started when I was young. Growing up, I was always the shy, quiet girl. I had a small group of friends, but I was never the center of attention. I wasn't the life of the party or the one who got invited to every social gathering. Instead, I was the one who sat on the sidelines, watching everyone else enjoy the spotlight. I was fine with that. In fact, I preferred it. Being invisible meant that no one could judge me. No one could see the flaws I worked so hard to hide. But deep down, I wanted more. I wanted to feel seen, to feel like I mattered. As I got older, that desire to be noticed grew stronger, but so did my fear. The fear that, if I ever truly let someone in, they would see the parts of me that I couldn't stand, the parts of me that I had spent years trying to bury. I feared that if anyone really got close, they would realize that I wasn't as perfect as I tried to appear, that I wasn't as confident or capable or lovable as I wanted to be. And so, I built walls around myself, keeping people at arm's length, convincing myself that it was better that way. If I never let anyone see the real me, then I could never be hurt. But as much as I tried to hide it, the fear never went away. It followed me into high school, into college, and into every relationship I had. I would make friends, get close to people, and even fall in love, but I would always pull back before things got too serious. I would convince myself that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy of their love and attention. I would find excuses to keep my distance, to protect myself from the inevitable disappointment that I was sure would come. I had a boyfriend in college. His name was Alex. He was kind, thoughtful, and completely different from anyone I had ever been with before. With him, I felt like I could be myself, like maybe, just maybe, I could let my guard down. But even with him, I held back. I couldn't help it. Every time things started to get too close, I would pull away, creating distance between us, and I couldn't figure out why. One evening, as we were sitting together on the couch, he asked me a question that I had been dreading for months. "Emma, why do you always seem so distant?" he asked softly, his eyes searching mine. "I feel like you're holding something back from me. Is there something you're afraid of?" The question caught me off guard, and for a moment, I froze. I wanted to be honest with him. I wanted to tell him about the fear that had been eating away at me for so long. But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come out. Instead, I did what I always did. I made an excuse. "I'm just tired," I said, forcing a smile. "It's been a long week." But inside, I was screaming. I wanted to tell him the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to admit it. I couldn't let him see the fear that I had buried so deep inside of me. The fear that I wasn't good enough. The fear that, if I let him get too close, he would see the parts of me that I couldn't stand. The parts that I hated. The parts that I had spent my whole life hiding. After that night, things between Alex and me began to change. I could feel the distance growing between us, and I knew that it was because of me. I was the one who had pushed him away. I was the one who had allowed my fear to drive a wedge between us. But I couldn't stop myself. Every time he got too close, every time he showed me love and affection, I felt like I was suffocating. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to feel like I mattered, but I didn't know how to let go of the fear that had controlled me for so long. Eventually, Alex and I broke up. He deserved someone who could be there for him, someone who could love him without fear. And as much as I hated it, I knew he was right to move on. I was too afraid to let him in, too afraid to let myself be vulnerable, and in the end, that was the one thing I couldn't get past. My fear kept me from having the kind of relationship I wanted, the kind of relationship I deserved. After the breakup and months reflecting on everything, I knew I needed to change, but I didn't know how. The fear that had controlled my life for so long felt like a heavy weight on my shoulders, and I didn't know how to lift it. But one thing was clear: I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep running away from the people I loved. I couldn't keep hiding from the truth. And so I made a decision. I decided to confront my fear head-on. I didn't know if I would succeed or fail, but I knew that I had to try. I started by opening up to my closest friends, telling them things I had never told anyone before. I told them about the fear that had held me back for so long, about the insecurities that I had hidden deep inside of me. I was terrified, but I knew that if I wanted to move forward, I had to face my fears. To my surprise, my friends were supportive. They didn't judge me or make me feel weak. Instead, they listened, and they comforted me. They told me that I wasn't alone, that we all have our fears and insecurities, and that it was okay to be vulnerable. Slowly but surely, I began to open up more, to let down the walls that I had built around myself. I started to realize that being vulnerable wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a sign of strength. It was the courage to show up as who you really are, without fear of judgment or rejection. But the most important thing I learned through all of this was that my fear didn't define me. I had spent so much of my life believing that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy of love or happiness. But I began to see that those were just lies I had been telling myself. I was enough. I was worthy. And I didn't have to let my fear control me any longer. The process wasn't easy, and there were days when I wanted to give up, when I felt like I wasn't making progress. But I kept pushing forward. I kept confronting my fear, one step at a time. And over time, I began to feel lighter. I began to feel more at peace with myself. Now, looking back, I realize that confronting my hidden fear was one of the hardest, but also one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. It didn't happen overnight, and it's still something I work on every day. But I've come to understand that fear is just a part of being human. We all have our fears, but it's how we choose to face them that defines us. I may have hidden my fear for a long time, but I no longer have to carry it alone. I've learned that it's okay to be vulnerable, to let others see the real me. And in doing so, I've learned that I am enough, just as I am.